Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into the incredible life of an 8th century pioneer. We're talking about the Muslim mystic Rabia al-Adawiyya. This is someone who started out as an enslaved orphan and completely shattered the conventions of her time to become one of the most revered spiritual teachers of her era, achieving a totally equal rank in the spirit. Let's get right into it.
I want you to imagine a world where spiritual hierarchies are completely entrenched, a world where devotion is driven almost overwhelmingly by the terrifying fear of damnation or the transactional hope of an eternal reward. And then along comes Rabia. Okay, let's dive into this, because to really understand her radical mindset, we just need to listen to her absolute most famous prayer. She said, "If I worship thee from fear of hell, burn me in hell, and if I worship thee from hope of paradise, exclude me thence." Just pause for a second. Let the sheer audacity of those words sink in. She completely upended the system. So how exactly did an 8th century woman develop such a breathtakingly pure philosophy of devotion?
To set the stage here, we really have to look at the spiritual framework she was operating within. As you likely know, Sufism is the mystical branch of Islam, and it's centered entirely on the pursuit of a direct, personal union with the divine. But what's incredibly fascinating about the early Sufi movement is its view on gender in the spiritual realm. According to the foundational texts, in the ultimate unity of God, there is, quote, neither male nor female, because the quest was entirely about the inner purpose of the heart and completely purging the self. Women absolutely could and did reach the highest spiritual ranks. They were conferred the title of saint just as naturally as the men were. Rabia wasn't just existing in this space. Later biographers would actually refer to her as the crown of men.
Let's move along and see how this builds, because her origin story seriously rivals any epic movie. Born around 717 AD in Basra, which is in modern-day Iraq, she was the 4th daughter in a family dealing with crushing poverty. In fact, the name Rabia simply means the 4th. During her childhood, a severe famine strikes, she is orphaned, and her sisters are all scattered. And then the tragedy compounds. She's seized by an evil-minded man and sold into slavery for a mere 6 dirhams. She is forced into grueling hard labor during the day, but she spends absolutely every waking hour of the night in intense prayer. So what's the turning point? Well, one night, her master looks down and sees her praying, but she's illuminated by this suspended, miraculous glowing light, a sakina, or halo of divine presence. He is so terrified and awestruck by this supernatural sight that he actually frees her the very next morning. So, from the absolute depths of bondage, she walks right into the desert as a free, ascetic woman.
Once she was free, her reputation for holiness just absolutely exploded, and naturally, this brought some incredibly powerful suitors knocking at her door. The Emir of Basra offered her unimaginable wealth for her hand in marriage. We're talking a 100,000 dinar dowry and a monthly income of 10,000 dinars. He was literally offering her the world. Yet, Rabia's response was staggering. Look at this stark contrast. She rejected the wealth, the status, the comfort, without even a second thought. She told him, "It does not please me to be distracted from God for a single moment." She wasn't just turning down a man here. She was making a definitive, very public choice for absolute, uncompromising asceticism and celibacy.
It wasn't just political figures either. Even the most elite spiritual leaders of the day sought her hand. The legends constantly associate her with Hassan of Basra, who was a massive theological figure at the time. When he allegedly proposed, she didn't just give him a simple no. She rebuffed him with this devastating intellectual test. She told him she would marry him, but only if he could answer 4 unanswerable questions about the ultimate, hidden fates of her soul. She asked, "Will I die a believer? Will I answer the angels correctly in the grave? Which hand will receive my book of deeds? And am I destined for paradise or hell?" To each of these, Hassan had to admit that only God knows those hidden things. And her mic drop response? She said, "Since I have these 4 questions with which to concern myself, how should I need a husband?" She brilliantly proved she quite literally had 0 time for earthly distractions.
Now, this wasn't just rhetoric, this was her everyday reality. Her asceticism was truly legendary. The absolute core tenet of her lifestyle was a total, unyielding reliance on God alone. I mean, if she needed something, she wouldn't even ask a neighbor for it. There's this famous story where, while she's traveling in the desert, her donkey dies. When people in the caravan offered to carry her bags, she completely refused. She told them she wasn't dependent on them. She trusted her creator to provide. And, according to the stories, her donkey miraculously came back to life. She turned down all earthly help because she deeply believed that the God who rules the entire universe could certainly provide for one single devoted servant. Now, what's really fascinating about this specific number is the absolute dedication behind it. For 30 years, Rabia prayed every single prayer as if it were her absolute last. Just think for a second about the sheer mental and spiritual stamina that requires. She separated her heart so entirely from worldly hopes that every time she bowed her head, she approached it with the intensity of a dying breath. She was constantly asking God to keep her occupied with Him alone, genuinely terrified that the world, or even her well-meaning friends, might distract her from that singular focus.
Because of this incredibly intense devotion, her biographers attribute a massive catalog of miracles, or karamat, to her. And this rapid-fire list is just a fantastic blend of the deeply supernatural and the slightly comical. For instance, we have a bewildered thief who tries to steal her only veil while she sleeps, but an unseen force repeatedly traps him in her cell until he finally just gives up and puts it back. Then there's this brilliant mathematical miracle where she gives away 2 loaves of bread to a beggar, fully trusting God will return it tenfold, and boom, precisely 20 loaves are delivered to her door shortly after. My personal favorite, though? She's cooking and needs an onion, but true to form, she refuses to ask a neighbor. Suddenly, a bird flies over and drops a perfectly peeled wild onion right into her frying pan. We also see wild animals flocking to her peacefully, but completely fleeing from her male companions. And yes, she even famously defied gravity, flying up into the air on her prayer mat just to prove a point to a showboating peer.
But here is the brilliant twist to all of this. Despite this laundry list of supernatural feats, Rabia herself was completely dismissive of them. Remember that showboating peer I just mentioned? That was Hassan. He tried to show off by floating his prayer mat on a river. So Rabia flew into the air, but then she immediately grounded him, stating, "That which you did, a fish can do just the same, and that which I did, a fly can do." The real work lies beyond both of these. She saw right through the parlor tricks. To her, these flashy miracles were completely beside the point. They were actually distractions from the real work of true saintliness, which is internal, quiet, and purely focused on the divine. And that perfectly brings us to the absolute climax of Rabia's story, and honestly, her most profound legacy, the philosophy of love, and how she fundamentally reshaped Islamic mysticism forever. In a theological landscape that was heavily dominated by sorrow, very strict ritual, and the terrifying awe of final judgment, she introduced something totally radical. This brilliantly illustrates the massive philosophical shift she brought about. The traditional baseline of her era, which we can call the School of Hassan, was entirely transactional. Basically, you worship God because you are terrified of burning in hell, or because you strongly desire the luxurious rewards of heaven. Rabia's way, however, was what scholars now call disinterested love. She basically argued that if you only love God for what you get out of it, or what you can avoid, you don't really love God at all. You just love yourself. Her devotion was done purely for the intimate, ecstatic love of the divine itself. It was completely stripped of any selfish desire for reward or any fear of punishment.
So, the crucial point we really want to leave you with today is this. Rabia al-Adawiyya absolutely challenged her contemporaries, and by extension, she challenges all of us right now. If the promise of reward and the threat of punishment were completely removed from your life, from your relationships, your work, or your personal ethics, what would remain? Would your devotion, your love, or your good deeds actually still stand on their own? Rabia's answer was a resounding yes, and it cemented her legacy as one of the most profound mystical thinkers in human history. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer today, and I'll leave you to think on that.